because we purchased them from a third-party vendor, a training provider, and they are basically generated on the fly before the course. So all of these tenants that were created when we requested them on Thursday. And I think there are some of the default settings they have in those training tenants that is causing that conflict. But I'll do some more research and see if that is really the case. But yeah, I'll get back to you on that one. But any other questions? I have a question though. Did you learn anything new this morning with Johan and Sandy?
Yes. And the main thing is I've got a ton of reading to do now.
Yeah, there is a lot to it. We mentioned this the other day, but if you are new into Graph, it has quite frankly a heck of a learning curve to get into. But once you get a hang of it, that's when you start to see like, oh, wow, I can do so many cool things. But Andrew and I do have a free community course up on the Academy that we run a couple of times. This one here, hour and a half long, will take you through like the basic step on Graph. So it's not as deep level as John and Sandy's session were, but it's a good starting point if you are new to Graph and PowerShell. We also have a mini course, the PowerShell itself. Let me just get this one copied and pasted. And again, no extra fee for these. These are community courses we try to do once a month. But we do have one on PowerShell too. Basically, if you're new to PowerShell, where to start. And to Mike's comment there in the chat, confused about Entra, Azure, Intune, and how they all belong together. And I mean, we've been using these platforms now for 10 years, and I'm still confused at times. So I don't feel bad that you are, because there is a lot of components to it. Like you use Intune to run a script on your client that sends data to Log Analytics that is really Azure and stores in Azure. But then you go back to Intune and you use KQL and queries to read it. Or you use a workbook in Azure. It's just, yes, it is a lot. It takes a while to take in, but you have to start somewhere. Yeah, and to Kevin's comment there, Office is part of this, Teams is part of this, Exchange Online is part of this. It's everywhere. Graph, it's like a giant spider, but instead of a couple of legs, it has like 2,000 legs that taps into a lot of stuff. So yeah. So unfortunately, we cannot teach you to become experts on that platform in just a couple of hours. It takes a little bit more. What we are trying to do is to give you at least a kick in the right direction, a bit of a jump start, and also, as I mentioned before lunch here, a little bit of inspiration for what can be done on the platform. So I'm hoping we did that. So yeah, that was the intention at least. All right. The topic at hand for now is combining Intune with imaging. So deploy machines over the internet. So first of all, why do we even need this? Do we need imaging? I believe you do. Even if you as a company outsource everything to someone else. That could be Dell, HP, Lenovo, or it could be a partner like CDW and others that works on behalf of those vendors. There is still a need, I think, always to be able to do some basic imaging capability in-house. As we mentioned Monday morning, it could be simple things as deploying a couple of test devices because you want to test out the scenario. You are tasked with configuring feature update plans in Intune, and you want to make sure they work. So you want to deploy a machine with the old version so that you can test your upgrades to the new version without necessarily having to borrow someone's machine and do the test in live production. Or it could be recovery scenarios. Or it could be just temporary deployment where you just need to, for troubleshooting purposes, get something deployed so you can work with it for a bit. I think there will be always a need for that. What we are seeing across the industry is not companies getting rid of deployment completely, but they are changing it drastically. So we see organizations moving away from these really complex custom front-end deployment databases, workflows, tags into asset management system, imaging with everything known to man in terms of applications and drivers and settings, into more basic deployments. A fairly clean vanilla image from Microsoft with a couple of drivers. You may remove a component or 5 from it, get rid of junk basically, but still having capabilities of doing that, but just doing a much simpler deployment. And that is pretty much where cloud imaging comes in handy. While you still can build really complex deployment solutions. And I mean, companies still do that, but they are fewer in numbers than they used to be. The trend is to go keeping things more simple. Also, imaging kind of ties into servicing as well, because once you deploy that machine, as you learned in the autopilot session, someone has put Windows on the box. You guys are still in charge of managing it over its lifetime. And that's why you have Intune in the first place, or a systems management stack. Now, in terms of, it can also be to recover from ransomware attacks and others. I recommend every company to have some sort of tested business continuity plan. So if you, God forbid, have something that you need to recover from, it doesn't have to be ransomware, it could be flooding or whatever. You have a bunch of machines that are not happy and you need to reimage them. You should have something available to you that can allow for that. And the beauty of cloud imaging is typically that it's hosted elsewhere. It's in a very different data center. It's up in Azure, it's up in Amazon, it's with an ISP, it's on a media that you use to initiate the deployment. But that's just the scenarios for it. And there are more or less 4 pillars to this mix. We have the cloud infrastructure itself. That's where the deployment solution lives. And that could be simple things as a GitHub repository. It could be PowerShell gallery, or it could be a VM or 2 that runs in Azure or Amazon or whatever hosting provider you work with. That's a fairly straightforward process. Then it becomes, okay, we have a deployment solution available on the internet. Fantastic. How do we start it? Because we cannot just go to a device and hit F12 and expect it to pixie boot over the internet. We need to prepare the device for that. So we're going to look into some different scenarios on how you can configure your devices so they can actually see, so they can start the deployment somehow. Then it comes down to transferring the content. What happens the moment when you start to put content up in Azure or Amazon that is not Intune content? What happens to your credit card? It will start to glow a little bit in the edges because now you have to pay for what you download. So how much does it cost to deploy a machine? In just data cost, egress cost, download cost? About $1, give or take. 0.087 dollars per gigabyte that you download. And you often download somewhere between an 8 and 12 gig, and that ends up to about $1. So when we're transferring content, we are often very interested in peering. Because if you deploy an office that way, and you deploy 100 machines, you only have to pay for one. And then the other 99 will get the content from the first one. But that content you don't have to pay for. So now you only pay $1 instead of $100, which makes a difference. And then, of course, monitoring the process becomes interesting as well. It's not like you can knock on an Azure data center door and say, hey, I would like to install a network sniffer tool here on your network. Would that be okay? Microsoft will say, no, you cannot. Amazon will say, no, you cannot. So you need to find other ways to monitor your process. You have less options available to you compared to if you guys own the network. There is no network team you can talk to and say, hey, I'm having trouble pixie booting here. Can you run a network trace on the switch for me? No, can't. So we'll come to that as well. Now, cloud infrastructure. The only solution that Microsoft supports for cloud imaging is to have Config Manager extended with the Cloud Management Gateway. That one supports deployment over the internet, requires no access to any on-premises infrastructure whatsoever. Well, the machine needs to have an IP address, you need to have a DSP somewhere, but you don't need access to Config Manager. So that's the only thing they support. And that's a service that you pay for. It's basically a virtual machine or 2 or 3 or 4 or 16 in Azure that you pay for. But it's managed from Config Manager. So come to that in a bit. Other common solution is that you take a virtual machine, you install good old MDT on it, and then you extend it with a healthy dose of PowerShell to make it support HTTPS deployment instead of an SMB file copy, which it does by default. Intune can be used not for bare metal imaging, but it can be used for servicing. And if you put your heart into it, you can actually integrate Intune with a cloud management gateway and Autopilot. So when a machine is enrolled in Autopilot, it can be told to install the Config Manager client, and it can be told to launch a sequence from a CMG so that it will run that sequence. So it's not a bare metal imaging, but you can install applications that way, complex application workflows that way. Then there is a community solution that's been around for a couple of years, OSD Cloud, driven and maintained by David Segura. And for those of you that have been following him on social media recently, you know that he was his solution got acquired or bought up by Recast Software. So they are taking over that platform together with David. Still a community solution, still going to be free, but it's under their umbrella now. And we already talked about Windows Autopilot, and we also talked about the automation framework behind the scenes. But this is what it comes down to. You need to have something that is capable of deploying a machine fairly quickly. We recommend to have a simple strategy to it, clean image, not too many applications, because once the machine gets involved into Intune, that's when we do the more advanced configurations with it. All right. So let's start with something. We can start with the CMG here. Andrew, are you back and want to do that demo, or shall I do it?
Just sat down.
There you go. Timing is everything, sir.
Give me just a moment here to get my notes up.
Yes, sir. I'll allow it.
Thank you.
Like you ever needed any permissions.
I had to earn those permissions.
Well, it's nice that you ask, I have to say, but not needed.
All right, let's see here. Let's go like this. And CMG, you said, right?
Yes, sir.
All
That was
right.
it.
So for the CMG, basically what we can do, and Johan, you may have covered this already, with the CMG, we can actually do some imaging over the internet, as long as we have a config manager infrastructure in place and have a cloud management gateway deployed, which it just so happens we do in this lab. So if I head over to my config manager site server here and look at the cloud management gateway, you can see that I've got one configured. I've had this in my lab for a few years now, um, and it's been running pretty smoothly. Basically, with the CMG, what we can do is allow our internet-facing clients to receive policy, receive deployments, like in this case, a full task sequence, and the CMG will actually be able to store that content and distribute it out to these clients. So if we look at the properties of the CMG, let's see what we actually have configured here. Um, so we have this connected to my lab tenant. So this is just connected to a regular Azure public cloud tenant. Nothing special there. But if we go over to our settings, there are a couple of things that we do need to configure. We do need to have a fully qualified domain name that is resolvable out on the internet, of course, and we need to have a certificate attached to that as well. In a lab, uh, I have found that using a Let's Encrypt certificate works very well, and happened to blog about that a little while ago. Um, so I actually use with this CMG a little bit of PowerShell and Let's Encrypt to actually automate the certificate renewal and assignment to the CMG service. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do this in production. Let's Encrypt certificates are widely trusted in the world.
Well,
And if you haven't seen the news, certificate lifetime is being reduced significantly. So automating certs is something that we're all going to have to do soon, anyways. If I recall correctly, I think certificate lifetime is going down to 47 days in by 2029. So that's pretty short. A little bit of a sidebar, but I'm trying to spread that word as much as I can.
but it is a very valid point. One of the key components to make a successful CMD implementation is to get a third-party certificate instead of trying to do it on your own.
Yep.
I've seen so many organizations trying to use their own PKI for this, and while it's a supported configuration, it's just a very painful one, because especially if you do imaging, because it comes at lovely race condition. How quickly can you get your own cert onto the machine in order to be able to connect to the server that you're also imaging from? That lovely catch-22 scenario. So
Exactly.
buy something that is already trusted by the client makes it a heck lot easier to connect to the server.
Yep. And the nice thing with Let's Encrypt is you don't even have to buy anything.
Even that so. But I mean, companies like DigiCert and others, it's not very expensive. It's just a couple $100 a year. It's not much for a real solid cert.
Exactly. Question here, is this a solution work similar to CertBot? I found that made Let's Encrypt pretty easy. Absolutely. So CertBot, common certificate automation tool used on Linux servers, Windows servers, appliances, things like that. This PowerShell module here is really the secret sauce behind this automation. And it's just another method of automating those let's encrypt cert challenges, whether you use an HTTP challenge or DNS challenge, which is what I'm using in my case. I don't really feel like exposing port 80 to the internet on my home network. So, yep, that's a great question.
Yeah, Malik had a question. Can we use this to image VDI machines? Absolutely, yes. Config Manager, sorry, the Cloud Management Gateway is just an extension of Config Manager.
Yep.
You still use the exact same sequences or anything. So if you have a functional sequence today that you use to deploy VDI machines with, or AVDs, whatever, it will work equally good over the internet. A little bit slower, perhaps, on the corporate network, but nonetheless, same sequence, same packages, same everything.
All right.
The answer is yes.
So now that we have our CMG, we have a resolvable domain name, we have a certificate configured here. Also want to point out, a few years back now, the CMG went to a different type of Azure resource called a scale set. And at that time, they enabled the ability to have a smaller VM, basically, excuse me, for the CMG, which allows us to run a lab CMG for quite a bit cheaper than a standard or a large instance. But with that scale set, if you do need to scale up, you can go to a larger VM and you can scale out more VMs if you're really going to put some load on your CMG. Now, what was the name of that blog post, Johan? Here we go. I found it. Just typed in CMG. If you're wondering the cost for these things, a few years back, Johan, I know you reached out to a few customers and got permission to share this information. But the cost to have a CMG, just from a management standpoint, is pretty darn low on a per device basis. And of course, it drops as you scale out.
We usually see on average between 3 and 5 cents per device per month. And that is not too bad.
I mean, this last one right here, 100,000 devices for 3,000 a month. And a lot of data moving, 40 terabytes. That's a pretty
average. Yeah, load, yeah.
So if you're curious about costs, this is what you're looking at. Did you have so this is from a management perspective, but did you have metrics at one point around what you could estimate imaging a single device would look like? Was it like $1 or something?
Yeah, $1 for but that last customer in that list, they were also doing imaging.
Okay.
Not on all 100,000 devices, but they were imaging quite a bit using the platform. They also used autopilot with sequences, which also ties into this cost. And it took me maybe 10 minutes to write the post. It took me 2 months to get permissions.
Well, yeah, and I guess to the point here, I mean, if they were imaging, that's the bulk of their cost, or the network or the transfer charges.
That's up pretty quickly. It does.
Yep. All right. So a few bits of information on the CMG as a whole. So once we have that all configured, this is what it looks like. You do have to have that resolvable name, you have to have a certificate, and you have to determine the size of the VM that you want to have up in Azure. And this is the really important part if we're going to be doing imaging or deploying any content from the CMG, is we allow the CMG to function as a distribution point in Azure effectively. Which, once we have that selected, if we go over to this content tab here, excuse me, you can see all of the packages that I've distributed to the CMG, which means we can, depending on what we're deploying out there, make all of this content available to our internet-based clients. What's pretty cool about this is if we head over to Azure, and we're going to look at this resource group here. So I have a resource group, which in Azure is just a group of logical resources. That could be a virtual machine, it could be some storage, it could be an IP address. It's just a group of those resources. And I keep my CMG in its own separate group. So when you deploy a CMG, by default, if you just have one VM instance, these are the resources that you're going to see here in Azure. You'll have your virtual machine scale set, which is one or more virtual machines that the CMG is running on. You'll have a key vault, which stores secrets and certificates related to CMG. You'll have the load balancer, which gets deployed even if you only have one VM. So this allows the clients to actually come in and talk with the CMG alongside these other network-based resources. And then we also have a storage account. Now, this is a lot of different resources, but I will say that even if you've never used Azure before, all of this gets spun up and managed for you. As long as you have an Azure subscription that you can connect to and create a CMG here in your config manager console, all of this gets managed. For example, the VM here, we're not ever in the VM. You can get into the VM. You should not get into the VM because it's not supported, but I know some people, Johan, have gotten into that VM before, where it was necessary. But the theory is that this is all managed for you. Now, what I think is pretty cool about this, though, is if we look at the storage account and we head over on the left here and we look at data storage containers, all of these different items here in this list look pretty familiar to me. They look like config manager package IDs. So if I click on one of these, I'll see some content in there. And sure enough, if we start to click through that directory, we see content that would indicate to me this is a Patch My PC managed application for PowerShell 7.5.4. So we can actually go in and find all of this content. It's just stored here clearly in Azure. And when you have a client that needs that content, reaches out, and the CMG can distribute it through here. Again, mentioned that you can RDP to this VM, but I definitely would not recommend it if you can avoid it. What was it you got in there for, Johan? Certificates or something at one point? Was that you?
Yeah, it was troubleshooting. Yeah, that was yeah.
Okay. Troubleshooting some certificates, but again, Johan's had to get in there. I've had this running for several years and I've never actually had to remote into my VM. Point being, you can, but it's not supported.
I didn't tell them.
No, and this is all of our secret now. You all have to share in the secret. But this is the configuration for CMG. I should also point out the alerts tab here. You can stop the service if you have transferred too much data, what you specify as too much data or what your organization specifies as that. And you can also set some thresholds for storage as well that will generate alerts for you. Now, from a troubleshooting standpoint, we can also right-click on the CMG and run this connection analyzer, which verifies that we can connect to the CMG itself. So when I pull this up, I can sign in. Sign in successfully with a user from that tenant. And if we go ahead and hit start, you can see this connection analyzer goes through a number of checks. This is always the first thing I do if I start to see issues with the CMG. Make sure that the connection is still there. Make sure the CMG can connect to the management point. And it'll go through a number of checks here. And absolutely, I've seen errors here that maybe run down something and it turned out, oh, maybe my certificate expired and I missed it. There we go. We have, for some reason, this isn't communicating with the management point. I've also seen times where I've had to right click on the CMG and synchronize configuration just to make sure that the CMG itself was in sync with config manager. I've had to stop service and start service, but most of the time, those things have fixed the problems. I'm actually going to go ahead and synchronize right now just to see if that will fix our problem while we move on. So in order to get to the topic at hand and actually deploy a task sequence or run a task sequence from an internet-based client, we head over to our software library, operating systems, task sequences, and we're just going to create boot media like we normally would. So if we click here, create task sequence media, we're going to go ahead and do standalone media, or actually no, bootable media. So we don't need to have all the content on there. We do want to make sure that the client can reach out to the CMG in order to download the content it needs. So we're going to select bootable media, but here we're going to select site-based media, and that's so we can direct the client or direct the boot media exactly where it needs to go to retrieve the content and policies that it should be looking for. From here, we can either create a flash drive from this, or we can simply create an ISO. So if we're going to test in a VM, for example, we can just do that. We'll call it CMG Media 2025 1106 .iso. Can I remember that? So we'll give it a name. We're going to have this ISO out on, or we're going to have this media, whether it's an ISO or USB, out on the internet. Recommend putting a password for that one. That's one of our only security mechanisms here. Although depending on what you're doing as well, you may want to reduce the time for this certificate for this boot media. I'll leave it as the default 1 year right now, but just something to keep in mind. And then we also want to enable unknown computer support. These are devices that could be brand new devices, or something's changed where we need they won't be known to the config manager site. So we're going to leave that enabled as well. Then when we get to boot image, we're going to select a boot image just like we normally would. We're going to select our distribution point. Now this says it's my on-prem distribution point. You can see that I don't actually have a cloud distribution point available in this UI, even though my CMG is one. So we leave that there. But when we get to management point, and this is the key to creating this boot media, we want to select the CMG itself, so that when the device boots up into that media, it's going to contact the CMG for any policies. No customization, and the summary looks good there. And we'll go ahead and create that media. Now, really, this is just, we're going to be able to boot up, and this is going to look like a standard WinPE with a config manager background and a task sequence selector. Having said that, since we saw a management point issue with this CMG, though, I might want to give this a few minutes before we test that. Johan, would you mind showing some of the things that you want to show?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
All right. Let me go ahead and snap the screen here. Other solutions that are capable of doing internet deployment is, for example, if you take good old MDT and you replace a bunch of PowerShell scripts with it. Normally, if I would go to an old school MDT deployment share and I will peek in to its scripts folder, that will be like a couple of hundred VB scripts here, or 169 VB scripts here. But if I go to one that have been extended with PowerShell, you will only see PowerShell scripts in here. Still use the workbench to manage our sequences, but here, for example, I have a sequence that installs Windows 11 25H2. And in the end, it does preparation for Windows Autopilot. And then I just had a pause, so I can pause it when testing, but then it will reboot and do some pilot integration or Autopilot integration there. So if I take a, create a blank VM here, call it number 28. Let's gonna create a virtual machine real quick that will boot on an ISO and then a PSD ISO. I'm gonna hit the button quick enough. You're gonna see what that looks like. This we're using BG-info to just show some background data that we are updating on the fly during deployment. You can use this together with config manager if you like as well. It's just a WinP boot image. It doesn't really matter which boot image it is. But what you will see eventually here after it's getting a good network connection here and start to connect to a web server is that it indeed goes to an HTTPS deployment share. Whereas the normal MDT would go to a whack server name whack file share. But it loads up a wizard. You have a couple of options here on the right-hand pane also, but these different wizard panes you can toggle on or off. But I'm just continue this wizard. I'm gonna pick the sequence I want to deploy. I'm gonna pick a disk I want to deploy to. That was something we added if you have multiple disks. Give it a computer name. We pick a role. These role depends what type of applications we deploy to it. And then here we have the Intune group. So this is where we tell the device what Intune group it should add itself to. So in this case, I'm going to put it in one of our Windows Autopilot groups. Local admin, regional settings, summary, and then off you go. And from now on, it's just a regular sequence running. But instead of downloading from a file share, it's downloading from a web server. And that web service can be practically anywhere. It can be on your network, it can be up in Azure, it can be in Amazon, it can be at any place that have internet access. The only port we need to have open is 443. It's a regular HTTPS web server, SSL. Other solutions that can work similarly, there is a Microsoft solution, an open source one. It's called FFU Builder. It's been around for a couple of years. That comes with a little GUI that you can run. You can define what image you want to work with. You can define it to include updates like Edge or OneDrive or .NET, or whatever it be. It supports application that you can add in. It can add in Office. It has support for drivers. It's using Vim files for drivers. And then you build a solution here. The way that one looks, if I go to a empty machine here and boot it up, so it boots up in WinPE. And it, like MDT does, like config manager does, it will apply an image. So you will see it starting that shortly. And you see how fast it is. You can deploy an image within a minute with this technology. This is sector-based imaging a la Microsoft style, like you had Ghost 30 years ago. So no Vim files and FFU file, which is an apply image. But here's the thing. We just need one way to get Windows onto the box. If we pay someone to do it, that's one way. If we do it, that's one way. And we have multiple options to do it. And after that has been applied, we'll copy some files and then we're going to reboot. And we are done there. And basically, when those machine reboots, both of them, we are going to see a command prompt, and that's just something that I added in to have ability to stop the demo. Normally, we wouldn't show the command prompt. That one will show up shortly. I think I will have one on this one also eventually, but this one is done. That one is still working on it. Some time to catch up. While waiting for that one to boot, let me grab those links for you.
Johan, can I ask you a couple questions right here?
Yes, sir.
All right, so you have these VMs. Is the magic in the boot media? Like, so you other than, you know, I've used MDT, I've used SCCM, I've used CMG, but really, what are the differences between that and what you're doing here? Is it the boot media being able to point to and get access to where the stuff's located?
So the only thing that the boot media does, I think it's easy to see it in the sequence here. If I bring up that one here, wrong server. I have a prepare for autopilot script. The only thing it does, it copies files over to Windows, because this step here is in WinPE. So I'm just having something that copies a couple of scripts to the offline image. So when it reboots, it's available in the offline image. And to make something start there, I have a, where did you go here? I have an unattend file that runs things in the specialized path. So before out-of-box experience. So I'm running those scripts that I copied down. That script in turn will generate a hardware hash, and it will upload that to a web service. And the way it looks is the following. If I go back to that virtual machine here and do the exit, this is where it launched the script that was copied. This is just going to start a splash screen in PowerShell, pure PowerShell splash screen. It comes from the PSD solution, but we use it for everything. Config manager, FFU, you name it. So this is where it runs to gather that hardware information on the device, and you will eventually see it's going to go ahead and connect also to a web service. So this is where it gets the autopilot hardware hash, like you guys did in the lab yesterday. I just running it automatically, and then it contacts the web service, and then it waits for the web service to do its magic. So if I go to the web server or web service server and open up one of the log files here, the one that was just created, it must be this one here. What was the serial number? Ended on 75. 75. So this is now the server taking that request and do everything that you guys did in the lab, but automatically. So it will connect the graph like we learned how to do it this morning. And then it will import the device. But then I have logic that waits for this to finish. And I'm not telling the device to continue until the registration is done, until I have a complete assignment. So the client will just sit and wait here for 10 minutes. But then it will come directly into autopilot. And this technique you can use independent, or it's not depending on a deployment solution. It's just a method of having something deploy Windows, but stage it in such a way so it launches a script when it boots that takes care and do the job, whatever that job might be. But it could be without autopilot as well. It can just be a bare metal deployment. I just want to have an image on a device because I'm testing something or troubleshooting something. But
Can you use this method just to create a USB bootable media and use it on on-prem devices?
Absolutely.
Yes.
MDT comes with offline media support. FFU come with offline media support. It even come with an option to prompt for a USB stick that you can use. And you deploy a machine in about 2 minutes. It's pretty quick.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And like the stuff Andrew showed, again, we have a sequence we boot up on a boot image, and the sequence we use to drive actions, whatever those actions may be. But yeah, at this point, we will see that still waiting for the import to finish. It's going to take a while, so you can just leave it running. And the final thing I wanted to show was the OSD Cloud. Just another option to deploy Windows. What I like about the OSD Cloud is that it's, first of all, completely PowerShell driven. And it's up in PowerShell Gallery. It is open source while still being part of Recast software. But if I boot on that media, that gets created when I install the work with a module here. You're going to see a bit of a difference here. Because this solution is doing something that is unique to this solution only.
Are all these scripts available in your Git repo?
Yes, we published them just before the newsletter last week. But this solution has been available for years. We just made an update to support the latest graph module. But this one is available here for download. This one shows the integration with PSD, but of course you can borrow this idea and use with whatever. Copy and paste semi-successfully. But okay, this is David Segura's solution. What's cool with this one, it actually supports wireless deployments also, something that Config Manager doesn't do by default. It can be hacked into it, but it doesn't support it. But this solution does, so you can do imaging over Wi-Fi. David figures out how to install stuff in WinPE from the PowerShell gallery. Quite impressive, that research, but it is doable. And eventually this boot image is just going to give me a command prompt or a PowerShell prompt, not because that is especially cool, but because I use it to start different versions of the solution for testing. So I'm going to start with the GUI, the OSD build. There are multiple options available. OSD GUI, GUI OSD. Come on. There. A couple to choose from. When you select this option, you get a small little wizard. It's a one-pager. Give me just a second. I have a UPS whose battery indicates it wants to be replaced.
How rude, poor timing.
Yeah, I know. Anyhow, very similar concept. You pick the version of Windows you want to deploy, you pick the edition. This one has support for driver packages as well. So you just go ahead and pick the model you want to work with. We can also get drivers from catalog. The thing with this solution is it pulls content from the vendors. So it pulls the image from Microsoft, and it pulls the Dell driver packages from Dell, the APs from HP, etc. So what's the benefit of doing that?
It's the latest, greatest of all those things.
Latest and greatest, and even better. It's free. You don't have to pay for the download. If you have a VM in Azure, you have to pay for download. So anyhow, I click Start. In this environment, I have configured to actually ask me to overwrite my hard drive. That's just the configuration in the solution, but you're going to see that it will ask to overwrite the disk here shortly. I'm going to say yes. And now it will format the hard drive, and it will start to download the image. And as you can see here, that image is coming straight from Microsoft. And this download is basically how quick is your internet link. You can deploy an image within 4 or 5 minutes if you have a good internet link. This solution doesn't support applications in the same way, but it does deploy Windows with drivers very, very quickly. It does have integration with Autopilot as well. And it's just another example on how you can do cloud-based imaging. And with that, I think we can jump over to the CMG again.
Johan, what would be your preference between the different solutions?
It's one of those lovely, it depends. Typically, if a customer have config manager and they have a cloud management gateway, I'll use that one. If they don't, I use something else.
What if you're trying to move away from SCCM and move to cloud only?
Well, then it's also one of those lovely, it depends. Do I want control of the content or don't? If I don't really care if it is the same deployment on a Monday and a Friday, I'll say use the cloud is a good solution. If I want to be able to control the content, so a machine that I'm deploying Monday and on Friday would actually be the same installation, then I will use a deployment solution that allows me to control the content, like PSD, like the FFU builder, or the upcoming solution from 2Point, deploy R, they call it. Try to actually hit it in the wizard. You might recognize the developer behind this solution. That's Mike Niehaus. He was the gentleman that, not single-handedly, but he was the lead developer for MDT for 15 years. He knows a thing about imaging. They are going to release a community version of this one too, that is free. Exactly how that will look and feel, I do not know. This one is still in technical preview, but at some point next year, this one will be available too. And this is also one thing that allows you to control content. So, I mean, there are others out there that offers deployment solutions. Because one customer in Germany that used Clonezilla, a platform I haven't seen in 20 years. And they were happy with it. Imaging is imaging. You just need to have something that works for you.
I really like the cloud OSD deployment without VPN connection. That is very usable.
Yeah, I mean, they have put in, I mean, David must have put in thousands of hours, literally, in OSD Cloud. When we set out to convert the MDT scripts from VB script to PowerShell, we thought it would take a couple of weeks. It took 5 months. And we were like 10 of us. So it was harder than it looked. But I learned a lot, so it's fun. All right, now CMG.
CMG is going to have to take a little bit longer pause. Not having a CMG issue in particular, but a site server issue that I was not having last night that's affecting the CMG.
Aha. All right. Well, I can do one better. All right, not one better. I can cheat.
Thank you, sir.
My screen share still showing? Yes. So basically what it comes down to, once you generate, and this is a guide we put together a while ago on how to set it up. Once you do whatever Andrew did earlier, once you install the CMD, once you generate the boot media, you have all the content up in Azure. Come on, here. It will look like any normal config manager deployment. The only difference is it's kind of hard to see from the screenshot, but it's getting the content from Azure instead of from the site server. That's the difference. Now, the $1 million question goes, how do we get this going? Well, in my experience so far, the most common way to initiate any internet-based imaging is to have a USB stick with the boot media only on it. But there are other options. You can send out mini routers that you use for access. We were showcasing a post from Tailscale yesterday, which is a really cool VPN solution. But you can basically pre-configure a Raspberry Pi, or even more cool, an Apple TV as a VPN router, and send to family and friends to get network access to something. I thought that was pretty cool. I'll post that in the chat for you also. Apparently my copy and paste skills are limited. Let's try this again. But you can also, from BIOS that supports it, you can boot directly from BIOS. HP, for example, Dell, Lenovo, you can customize their BIOS. I wrote an article on how to do with HP because they were the first vendor to actually have a decent platform for it. But basically, if you have an HP device, a business PC, I should say, they will contain an extra flash card. That flash card is configurable. So with a healthy dose of PowerShell, and I mean healthy dose of PowerShell, you can stage information on where to boot from. So on the HP, instead of pressing F12, you press F11. Normally, that will go into the HP recovery. But since I changed it, it goes to my deployment server instead. So when I press F11, it will download the boot vim from a web server, my web server, and then start whatever that boot image does. If it's a PSD boot image, it will start that. If it's an FAU, it will start that. If it's OSD Cloud, it will start that. We're just exploring different options on how to boot. One of the 2-point developers, they even figured out, not sure how, but they figured it out on how to use an iPhone or Android together with USB stick so that the phone shows up as a network card in WinPE. So we were able to get deployment going over 5G, but for being 5G, reasonably good speed. You can image a laptop on a mountain hill somewhere as long as there is internet access on the phone. That's pretty cool. And finally, there are Pixie servers that are capable of booting of internet as well. I have one here I can show. I think it's still active, otherwise I have to show that later. Let's see. Yeah, so this one gives a menu. If I want to build with config manager, I will select config manager. If I want to build from MDT, I want to build MDT. If I want to deploy Ubuntu, I do that. If I want to set up CentOS, I will do that. Or I can connect to a very popular NetBoot site, which in turn will give me a lot more option if that one is up and running. We'll see shortly. So I can pick from a couple of live CDs that are available and just deploy them right now. But this is a commercial product. It is not free. It's part of the 2-point software iPixie Anywhere suite. This one here, I still do a lot of contracting work with them, so I'm slightly biased, but this allows you to do HTTPS Pixie boot deployment. Keeper's question, if Pixie is not particularly slow, not when you do it right. If you try to use a Microsoft Pixie server to boot over a WAN link, yeah, expect a download time for 40 minutes. If you do it from a Pixie server capable of HTTPS, it's in seconds, because the boot image doesn't come from the Pixie server. It senses it from a local friend. If there is anyone around that happen to have blocks that WinP needs, it will grab it from the local friend. Obviously, if you're on a network where you are the only PC, yes, it will have to download it from the Pixie server. But since we are using HTTPS now, it is so much faster to download a half a gig content compared to TFTP, which Microsoft WES or native Pixie responders are using. But this is fun. We live in a time where we have so many options available to get imaging going, to combine it with model management, to combine it with autopilot, or even as we showed earlier this week, when we talked about enrollment. Again, we have those one reverse plan B things where you can take any deployment solution, config manager, MDT, anything, and just make sure to stage a package onto the disk in the WinP phase. Done. Machine enrolled. If the other one actually finished that I showed earlier, it could be fun to see. I think that one finished up nicely. Log file on the server. Yeah, it did finish. It imported the device. It took 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And then it added it to a group and waited for the assignment. That took about 5 minutes. So all in all, we're looking at 6-7 minutes of configuration, but it was done automatically for us. So now when that machine comes up here, it's going to be at the out of box screen. I think that's pretty cool. All right. Yes. So that was booting, starting, transferring our content. In general, when you start to do imaging over the internet, we are imaging over HTTPS. So you want to make sure that the stuff that you download is as small as possible. So driver packages, put them as WIM files. Applications, put them as WIN files. Because it's, again, for the same reason why we create Intune WIN packages for Intune of applications. Because they are smaller, they're compressed. We do the same thing for applications. And if you have an app that is a WIM file, something I like about that concept is just need a wrapper. That will mount the WIM file, install whatever's in it, and then dismount it. You don't even need to unpack it to the disk. Other techniques I recommend embracing, peering our content. You cannot use the label optimization because it's only certain content that supports that technology, but you can use branch cache. That's been part of Windows since Windows 7. That one works with all type of config-minded content. It works with the PSD content. It works from anything that is downloaded from a web server that you can control, so that you can enable branch cache on it. And the config-minded case is not terribly complicated, it's a checkbox. But we do that to reduce cost and speed up things. To have content or clients sharing content to each other. And it's pretty cool. I've been part of a pretty large scale deployments. The more clients you deploy, the faster it goes. It's like throwing a ring in a pond somewhere that those on the water that just expands. And the more you have, the more quicker it goes. And we have monitoring of the process. I know you, Andrew, were very excited about the last one.
I was, and I actually have something to show.
I take that. That's a win.
Perfect. So I'm going to start because this will go right into it. If we look over here, did get a VM going off of that boot media that we created. So if we look here, you can see I have that ISO that we created attached to the VM, and I'm on a different network than my site. So like we mentioned, there's nothing that looks inherently different in WinPE that we're actually using the CMG, but just for a little bit of proof, we can see that we are on the 192.168.1 subnet. And if we go over to the config manager site here, that is not a boundary that currently exists. So I'm just on effectively a home network hitting that CMG. And so as Johan mentioned, we can actually monitor that. Few years back, this was not working entirely well. That is to say, pretty much not at all. But our clients that are out on the internet can actually send status messages back to the site through the CMG. And here you can see that I am using an open source tool from Trevor Jones called Config Manager Task Sequence Monitor, which I will drop a link into the chat for momentarily. But this is just showing all of those status messages coming back from the client to the Config Manager site in pretty close to real time. These all came through pretty quickly once I fired it up, but you can see exactly what's happening during the task sequence. We've got some things that completed successfully, but we have some other things like our common step in a task sequence to restart into Windows PE if it's not already running. Well, it skipped that because I was already in Windows PE, and we actually see all of that information coming through the status messages. So super, super helpful. This tool is quite helpful as well. As you may have noticed, this refreshed on its own. So if we need to sit and actively watch a remote task sequence happening, we can see that right here. And over here, seems like we've gotten all the content and starting to apply the OS. But yeah, it's fantastic. I love when these native tools work just like that.
Well done.
Let me get well, what would have been more well done is if I was monitoring my disk space better on my site server.
Ah, that little nugget that you need to have storage. Yeah.
Yes. That's what happens when you have ADRs running in a lab and you forget about them. And
Well, I may have done that a couple of times myself. So
there we go. There is the link for that. And I'm happy we got to see that working.
all right. Would you mind if I borrow the screen again?
Not at all.
All right. Because on my machine over here, that VM that I deployed earlier just finished.
Nice.
And we are ready for autopilot. And if you look at the total time from when it booted, you have here 145 here. Yeah, roughly 10 minutes it took to get the machine into autopilot from nothing. That's not too bad. Still have to wait for autopilot to do its part, but it's not too bad. Other things you can do, you can have custom web services. I did a video on using REST-PS like a year and a half ago. You can use bits for upload. I use that frequently. You might know that in IIS, you can create virtual directories, but you can also have virtual directories that are upload folders. So you can say bits uploads, or you can upload log files. And funny enough, the good old MDT monitoring service, I don't have anything on that one, but that one actually works over the internet as well. That's pure coincidence. It just happened to be an internet-driven web service. So, yeah. All right. Any questions on cloud imaging? Anything we can show you? We have Richard coming in now at 2:30. We will have a little break before that. He's going to talk about. He will show you how to deal with always on VPN. And if I know Richard well, he probably cannot fail to mention a little bit of certificate or two and DNS. It used to be his go-to If you ever meet Rister on a conference, ask for a sticker, put it that way.
Johan, on the MDT server, do you have a bunch of web services running on there that are kind of running the interference between the boot media on the remote side, and then
Yes, yes.
it has to be an internet facing web server, basically, right?
Yes, one of them.
Okay.
In this case, I decided to host it on a VM, but there are plenty of options available. The one I'm using is this one here. It's an open source web service called RESTPS. It's written by Justin, not the Cloud PC Justin, Pattern C Justin, another Justin. So this one here, beautiful solution, works well. As I mentioned, I did a video about that here on how to set it up. This is a generic web service. It can do everything you can script. So it runs PowerShell scripts on the server side. Other options that are popular, especially in education space, is PowerShell Universal. Ironman software that we just acquired by Devolutions. Same company as does that remote management tool that I'm using here this week. But this is a very popular cloud offering to be a web service for PowerShell scripts. But this is a paid solution, so you have to pay for it. Part of the 2.0 suite that I showed you earlier is also a web service that is universal that you can leverage. There are other platforms. You have Amazon, Lambda, you have functions in Azure, you have Zapier, help Andrew, do I forget anything?
Well, that's a lot of them.
Yeah, there are a lot of web services out there that you can tap into and use.
Yeah.
I like the idea. Every time I need to do secure access, I don't want to do that on the client itself.
Mm-mm.
I want to have code running somewhere more securely, so the client will talk to that code, and that code does whatever that code is supposed to do. So like layered security. I hate to put in credentials on a client because they get lost or get wings, however you say it. But it's like the Cloudway folks this morning. I wasn't attending the entire session, but they typically cover when you upload data that you have to worry about what account or credential to use when doing that. You don't want to have them visible in a clear text in a script that runs on a client. That will be not good.
I've seen some interesting ways of them verifying that in some of their scripts, where if something's running from a client, let's say you want a client to send information up to Log Analytics, you can build into the script to verify that the client is actually joined to the correct tenant and things like that.
Yeah, is it a cloud? Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
All right, but it is 2:20, and that gives us 10-minute break before Richard joins us here. So please take a quick break. We'll see you guys back in a couple of minutes here.
Sounds good. See you shortly.